you tell us what are the highlights of this year's annual ADB meeting?
So for me, the annual meeting is such an important gathering. It's an opportunity for all of our shareholders to come together to talk about strategic partnerships, strategic direction, but it also brings together civil society, private sector, academia, media, to really explore ways that we can amplify our impact across the region to address economic and social issues. And I think there have been some big announcements made at this annual meeting that really seek to address some of the core systemic issues across the region. One really big announcement was increased ambition to address food and nutrition security in the Asia-Pacific region. So our President Kanda announced an increase in our targeted operational support for this area of cumulatively reaching $40 billion by 2030, between 2022 and 2030. And that's really looking at production, processing and distribution, and from both our private sector and public sector windows. Another big announcement is a platform to accelerate private sector development, and this fund was initially capitalized by the government of Japan. So they committed $20 million, and this is to address policy reforms, but also to directly catalyze private sector investments. And this is also then in line with another key priority that President Kanda outlined, which is to reach $13 billion in annual lending to the private sector by ADB, and that's up from about $4.7 billion that we achieved in 2024. So these are significant scaling up in these two really important areas. Also important for Mongolia, we have a huge program on food security, looking at boosting sustainability and efficiency and scale of domestic agribusinesses, and that's in line with the President of Mongolia's food security initiative as well. And actually last year in the private sector, it was ADB's biggest year yet for direct lending to the private sector. We reached $105 million, spanning everything from agribusiness and financial institutions to trade finance. So big announcements at the annual meeting, all very relevant for our work in Mongolia.
Will the discussions and decisions made during the annual meeting affect in any way the ongoing and future operations of the ADB in Mongolia?
Yeah, so these discussions sort of frame our overall strategic and operational approach as we go forward. And that covers the entire Asia-Pacific region, but of course, Mongolia sits in that context, so it also then impacts, what we're looking at. And, the main sort of guiding approach for us in the country is framed within our country partnership strategy. Our last one just ended, and that was really focused on recovering from COVID and sort of laying foundations to help the government really speed up economic growth and inclusion coming out of COVID. But some of the big themes that have been discussed here, they include, how do we maintain long-term and stable growth amid some economic uncertainty, right? And so some of the key things that President Kanda emphasized were, stable macroeconomic policy as well as enhanced regional cooperation as really key to fostering stability across the region. And these have been big areas for our work in Mongolia so far, and clearly institutionally they'll maintain their prominence, and so they will continue to feature heavily in our work going forward as well.
The ADB country partnership strategy for Mongolia from 2025 to 2028 will be announced this month. What are the key strategic priorities and objectives of this new CPS?
Yeah, so our new strategy 2025 to 2028, so we organize them so that they're aligned directly with our with the government cycles, right? So we've been working really closely with the government on formulating the strategy and making sure that what we're proposing is really in line with the government's action plan. So I can give you more details once it's endorsed by our board, but I think one of the key things that we're going to continue to focus on is supporting the government in managing its dependence on mineral resources and the inherent macroeconomic vulnerabilities that affords the country. So we want to continue to emphasize diversification and stable macroeconomic policy, as I mentioned before, and a lot of the key themes that have been discussed here, such as climate resilience, food security, private sector development, these are in our proposed strategy as well. So I'll look forward to sharing more details with you once it's endorsed by our board.
Okay. Mongolia will host the UNCCD COP17 next year in 2026. So in what areas would the ADB cooperate with Mongolia in the fight against climate change and resolving environmental issues?
So it's a complex challenge in Mongolia, and we've long recognized that pasture degradation and desertification are a concern for rural livelihoods in particular, and so we have been working on various initiatives to kind of better assess some of the challenges, but also formulate our assistance to address them. We've had some programs working directly with communities on water resource management, and these are areas that are experiencing this pasture degradation and desertification. We also have a very big program, the IMAG in SUM's Green Development Investment Program, and that's a 10-year program that's meant to cover 17 IMAGs. And a big component of that is working with pasture user groups to work on sustainable pasture management practices. So in terms of our programmatic work, we're already collaborating closely with the government, and it's really encouraging to see the government take such leadership in hosting COP17 and really convening dialogue around this issue, because it's not just Mongolia that's affected, but several other countries. So the opportunity for collaboration is really quite high. So the government has organized meetings with development partners to see how we can all support, and we are working closely with the preparatory office to see how some of our technical assistance or our knowledge work can be used to sort of highlight some of Mongolia's good practices, including traditional nomadic herding practices and sustainable pasture management. So we're really looking forward to that event next year.
In the Asian Development Outlook for April 2025, ADB projected Mongolia's economic growth to be 6.6%. Would the global trade uncertainties, including the tariffs and the trade wars, possibly affect this figure?
That is, I think, a question that's on a lot of people's minds. Our Asian Development Outlook, so it was released in April, and we did project a short-term positive growth scenario for Mongolia, not just 6.6% in 2025, but 5.9% in 2026. And this is based on our expectation that mining output would remain strong, the Oyu Tolgoi expansion would continue, but also the strong services sector and recovery in the agriculture sector, because we had the really bad winters in 2023 and 2024. But it was released before the tariffs were announced. And so our preliminary assessment is that the direct impact on Mongolia should be quite modest, because the US only represents around 1% of Mongolia's trade. But I think one thing that we're mindful of is that if there are significant impacts on the economy of the People's Republic of China, that could have spillover effects for Mongolia, just as Mongolia's main trade partner. So our economics team is closely watching the developments in the trade regimes, and any projections that we release in September with our Asian Development Outlook update, those would hopefully incorporate some of the anticipated impacts.
Okay, thank you so much to Shannon Cowlin, ADB Country Director for Mongolia. We are currently at the ADB annual meeting held in Milan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure to see you again. I'm really glad you've had such a good time.
Yes.